The front door creaked open, a sound Jake hadn't heard in months. He stepped across the threshold of his home, and the familiar scent of worn wood and old memories enveloped him. The sunlight streamed through the front windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. But the warmth of the sun did little to ease the chill in his bones. The house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield he had left behind. "Emily," he called, his voice echoing in the stillness. The absence of response settled heavily in the air. With each step deeper into the house, the weight of the silence pressed down on him, a reminder of the long months spent away from the comforts of home. Jake's heart raced as he moved toward the living room, half expecting to see his wife and daughter. Instead, he was met with an unsettling sight. The cushions on the couch were askew, and the coffee table was cluttered with magazines, remnants of a life that seemed to continue without him. A sense of foreboding washed over him as he took in the disarray. Then he heard it, a faint cry, barely above a whisper, echoing from somewhere in the house. It sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through his veins, pushing him to move forward despite the rising anxiety. The sound was soft yet insistent, like the call of a child lost in the dark. Immediate reaction: confusion and fear. "Hello," he shouted again, his voice trembling slightly. He strained to listen, heart pounding in rhythm with his footsteps. Was he imagining things? The isolation of combat had left its mark on him. Perhaps he was just hearing echoes of memories, or remnants of the chaos that had surrounded him in the war. He moved towards the sound, each step echoing the uncertainty swirling in his mind. Thoughts raced. Was Sophie playing a prank? Did Emily leave the television on? The quiet of the house was unsettling. It was a silence that screamed of something amiss. As he reached the hallway, the cry came again, louder this time, a desperate, heart-wrenching sound that sent chills down his spine. It was coming from the basement, a place that had always felt off-limits, shrouded in shadows and dust. He hesitated, the memories of his time away flooding back, images of gunfire, the smell of smoke, and the cries of his comrades. Yet here he was, in his own home, confronted by a cry that seemed to tug at his very soul. Setting the stage, a home in limbo. Jake took a deep breath, steadying himself as he approached the basement door. It was an old wooden door, weathered and worn, creaking ominously as he pushed it open. The dim light from above barely penetrated the darkness below, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with dust and the musty scent of disuse. He descended the creaking stairs, his heart racing as the cry became clearer, filled with a mixture of fear and longing. It felt like a ghost from his past, an echo of the life he had left behind, and the unresolved questions that loomed in the back of his mind. Each step down was a step deeper into the unknown, into the heart of his home that felt so foreign now. The basement, once a place of laughter and family games, had transformed into a realm of uncertainty and dread. He remembered how Sophie would play down here with her toys, her laughter echoing off the walls, filling the space with joy. Now it felt like a prison, a tomb holding secrets he wasn't ready to confront. The cry intensifies. A moment of clarity. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, the cry morphed into something more distinct, a soft whimper mixed with the sound of something being moved. Jake's pulse quickened. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Is someone down there?" He called out again, voice barely above a whisper. The response was silence, heavy and suffocating. He took a cautious step forward, the wooden floorboards creaking beneath him, echoing in the stillness. Then, in the corner of his eye, he spotted a figure huddled against the far wall. A small shape, wrapped in a blanket, was curled up, trembling. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Was it Sophie? As he took a tentative step closer, the figure shifted, and his heart dropped. It wasn't Sophie. It was a stray dog, thin and shivering, eyes wide with fear and desperation. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by a wave of empathy for the creature in distress. The unfolding mystery. What lies ahead? The dog looked up at him, tail tucked between its legs, as if it had been waiting for someone to rescue it. But in that moment of relief, another thought hit him. How did it get here? Why was it alone in his basement? The question spiraled in his mind as he crouched down, extending a hand towards the trembling creature. "Hey there, buddy," Jake said softly, his voice calming, though his heart still raced with confusion. The dog's whimpering subsided slightly, but its body remained tense. In that moment, the faint echoes of combat faded away, replaced by the urgent need to understand what had happened during his absence. The quiet house, once a sanctuary, had turned into a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Jake's instincts kicked in. He needed to find Emily, to understand why the house felt so empty, and why there was a dog alone in his basement. It was a bright Saturday morning, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh pancakes wafting from the kitchen. The sun poured in through the windows, casting golden rays across the small, cozy home that Jake and Emily had built together. Laughter bubbled through the rooms as their 5-year-old daughter, Sophie, dashed around the living room, her golden curls bouncing as she played with her toys. The sound was a melody, a sweet symphony of family life, and for Jake, it was a moment to cherish. This was their last day together before he would leave for deployment, and while Jake tried to put on a brave face, the weight of what lay ahead loomed heavily over him. He had tried to focus on the joy of the day, but the anxiety gnawed at him. Jake watched as Emily flipped pancakes with practiced ease, her laughter ringing out as Sophie pretended to be a chef, complete with an apron tied around her waist. "Daddy, come help," Sophie squealed, her tiny arms outstretched as if she were summoning him to join her culinary adventure. Jake couldn't help but smile, a warmth spreading through him despite the looming uncertainty. "Coming, my little chef," he called back, rushing to her side. They created an elaborate game, pretending to serve an imaginary family with all sorts of creative dishes. But as the play unfolded, Jake's heart sank a little with the knowledge that he would soon be leaving the very people who filled his world with love. A difficult decision, embracing duty. After breakfast, they settled on the couch for a family movie. Snuggled between his wife and daughter, Jake felt a profound sense of belonging. Emily leaned against him, her warmth grounding him in the moment. As the movie played on, however, his mind began to drift, haunted by thoughts of the mission ahead. "Jake, are you okay?" Emily's voice broke through his thoughts, concern etched across her face. She could sense the tension simmering beneath his facade. "Yeah, just thinking," he replied, forcing a smile. He brushed a stray curl from her forehead, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers. "You know how it is." "I do," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "You don't have to pretend with me. You can share whatever you're feeling." Jake's throat tightened as he considered her words. "It's just, I don't want to leave you guys," he finally admitted. "What if something happens while I'm gone? What if I can't come back?" Emily placed her hand on his cheek, her touch reassuring. "You're going to come back. You have to believe that. We're going to be right here waiting for you, just like always." The sincerity in her eyes gave him strength, yet he couldn't shake the gnawing anxiety that lingered in the back of his mind. Duty called, and as a soldier, he had made a promise to serve, but that promise felt heavier now that he had a family. Community background. The ties that bind. The community they lived in was a close-knit one, filled with neighbors who looked out for each other like family. Jake and Emily had made their home in a quaint town where everyone knew everyone. They attended block parties, where laughter and music filled the air, and everyone came together to share food and stories. This sense of belonging had always grounded Jake, giving him the strength to face the challenges of his job. But with each deployment, Jake felt the weight of that connection grow heavier. He was leaving Emily and Sophie behind to navigate the uncertainties alone. He had seen firsthand how families were affected during wartime: grief, anxiety, and the burdens of single parenting. Every time he returned, it felt as though the community had shifted, evolving in his absence. As they watched the movie, The doorbell rang. Sophie leaped up, racing to the door with a child's excitement, and Jake followed, a smile breaking through the tension. When he opened the door, he was greeted by their neighbor, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who had lived next door for as long as Jake could remember. "Hey there, champ," Mr. Thompson exclaimed, his voice warm and jovial. "I brought over a little something for your last day." He handed Jake a small wrapped package, a mixture of old-fashioned wrapping paper and tape. Jake's brow furrowed in confusion. "You didn't have to do that, Mr. Thompson. It's really not necessary." "Nonsense. We've all been through this before. Just a little something to remind you of home while you're out there," he insisted, waving his hand dismissively. Jake opened the package to find a small wooden carving of a soldier holding a child. It was beautifully crafted, a simple but powerful reminder of what he was fighting for. "Thank you," Jake said, touched. "This means a lot." "Remember, son," Mr. Thompson said, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder, "you're not just fighting for your country. You're fighting for your family and this community. We'll be right here, holding down the fort while you're away." Emotional farewell. A moment of connection. After Mr. Thompson left, the family spent the afternoon in the backyard, where the sun cast a golden hue over everything. Jake helped Sophie with her bike, teaching her how to ride without training wheels. Each wobble and fall was met with encouragement and laughter, a bonding moment that made Jake wish time would stand still. As the sun began to set, they gathered around a small fire pit. The flames flickered, casting warm light on their faces. Emily made s'mores, and they shared stories, each laugh a reminder of the love that enveloped them. "Promise me something, Daddy," Sophie said between bites of gooey marshmallow. "Promise you'll come back and take me to the park again." Jake's heart twisted at the innocent sincerity of her request. "I promise, sweetheart, just like we always do," he replied, his voice steady but laced with an underlying ache. Emily reached out, taking Jake's hand in hers, grounding him in the moment. "We'll be waiting for you, just like always. We're in this together, no matter the distance." As the fire crackled, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving a piece of himself behind. He cherished every second, knowing it would fuel him through the long days ahead. A day to remember. The departure. The next morning, the atmosphere was charged with emotion. The family drove to the base, where the familiar sights of soldiers in uniform and military vehicles brought back a rush of memories. As they parked, the reality of his departure began to sink in. The air was thick with tension as they approached the gathering of families. Children were playing, and wives were hugging their husbands tightly, the bittersweet blend of love and anxiety palpable. "Remember, Daddy," Sophie said, her voice small but resolute. "You're my hero." Jake knelt down to her level, his heart swelling with pride. "And you're my biggest reason to fight," he said, the weight of his words hanging between them. They exchanged a long embrace, the world around them fading as they clung to each other. When it was time to go, Jake stood tall, knowing he had a family waiting for him, a reason to return home. But as he turned to walk away, the image of his wife and daughter lingered in his mind like a beacon, guiding him through the darkest days of war. Jake stood frozen at the bottom of the basement stairs, heart racing, as the reality of his surroundings sank in. The dog cowered in the corner, its big eyes watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. Jake's mind raced. Why was this creature here? Was it abandoned? Was it a sign of something more sinister lurking in the shadows of his home? Taking a deep breath, he crouched down to the dog's level, extending a tentative hand. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured, his voice gentle, hoping to reassure the frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you." As he reached out, the dog flinched, pulling back further into the darkness. Jake's heart ached for the animal. He understood that feeling all too well, the fear of the unknown, the longing for safety. The basement felt suffocating, the air thick with dust and unresolved tension. Suddenly, he heard a noise upstairs, a soft thud followed by a hushed voice. It was Emily, and the sound sent a wave of anxiety through him. He stood up quickly, glancing toward the stairwell, torn between the need to comfort the dog and the growing concern for his wife. "Emily?" he called out, moving towards the stairs. The dog remained motionless, but Jake could feel its eyes on him, watching, waiting. Unexpected discovery. Hidden truths. As he ascended the stairs, he noticed the light from the living room spilling into the hallway, casting elongated shadows on the walls. He paused at the door, uncertainty gnawing at him. What had he missed during his time away? What had changed? Pushing open the door, Jake was met with an unsettling sight. The living room was in disarray. Children's toys were scattered across the floor, a stark contrast to the carefully organized space he remembered. But it wasn't just the mess that caught his eye. It was Emily. She was sitting on the couch, her shoulders hunched, staring at the floor as if the weight of the world rested on them. "Hey, Em," Jake said softly, stepping inside. "Is everything okay?" Emily looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm fine," she replied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Just a lot on my mind." Jake's heart sank. He could see it, the toll the past months had taken on her. The sparkle in her eyes was dimmed, replaced by a shadow of worry that he hadn't noticed before. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but an invisible barrier held him back. "Why is the house so messy? Is Sophie okay?" he asked, trying to mask the concern in his voice. "She's fine," Emily said, glancing toward the hallway where Sophie's room was located. "She's just been a little restless since you left. I've been trying to keep everything together." Jake felt a pang of guilt twist in his stomach. "I'm sorry, I know it's been hard," he said, stepping closer. "I wish I could have been here to help." "You were serving your country," Emily said, her voice wavering. "You didn't have a choice. But I felt so alone, Jake." The admission hung heavy in the air, the truth more painful than any wound he had sustained on the battlefield. He wanted to pull her into his arms, to assure her that they would get through this together, but the weight of unspoken words stifled him. Community reaction, whispered concerns. Before Jake could respond, the doorbell rang again, interrupting the heavy moment. He felt a rush of gratitude for the distraction, but the tension in the air remained palpable. "Do you want me to get it?" Jake asked, looking toward the door. "No, I'll get it," Emily replied, wiping away a tear. She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate as she walked toward the door. Jake remained in the living room, his heart pounding as he listened to her speak with whoever was on the other side. He caught snippets of conversation, and his stomach twisted when he recognized the familiar voice of Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor. "Emily, dear, we just wanted to check on you," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice filled with concern. "We haven't seen you or Sophie around much lately." Jake could feel the weight of scrutiny in the air. He had seen how the community rallied together, and yet he feared the whispers that might arise. In small towns like theirs, people talked, and he didn't want anyone to speculate about his family during his absence. "Just been busy, Mrs. Jenkins," Emily replied, a little too brightly. "Sophie's been a handful since Jake left." The words stung like daggers, and Jake's heart ached for Emily. He wished he could be the rock she needed, the partner who supported her instead of a distant figure on the phone. "Please let us know if you need anything," Mrs. Jenkins offered, her voice filled with genuine concern. "We're all here for you." The door closed, and Jake turned to Emily, his heart heavy with the knowledge that their struggles were no longer private. The community was watching, and the pressure of their expectations loomed like a storm cloud overhead. Exploring the unexpected, letters from the past. After Emily returned to the living room, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As they settled back on the couch, he noticed a box tucked away in the corner, a box he didn't recognize. It was old and dusty, with yellowing edges that suggested it hadn't been touched in years. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to it. Emily glanced over, a shadow passing over her face, "Oh, just some old things. I haven't had the chance to sort through them." Curiosity piqued, Jake reached for the box. "Mind if I take a look?" "Sure," Emily replied, but her voice was hesitant, a note of caution lacing her words. As he opened the box, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. Inside were letters, photographs, and trinkets that told the story of their early years together. Notes they had exchanged, concert tickets, and even the first photo of Sophie they had taken as a family. But as he sifted through the contents, he found something unexpected. Letters from Emily, addressed to him during his deployments. The familiar handwriting was tinged with emotion, words spilling out onto the pages. "Dear Jake," he read aloud, his voice steady but filled with wonder. "Every day without you feels like an eternity. I try to be strong for Sophie, but it's hard." He glanced at Emily, who was now looking at the floor, her eyes filled with regret. "I didn't know you kept those," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you ever send them?" Jake asked, his heart racing as he pieced together the puzzle of their last months apart. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to burden you with my fears. I thought you needed to focus on the mission, on keeping yourself safe." Jake felt a mix of anger and sorrow swell within him. "But I wanted to know, Emily. I wanted to be there for you. We're a team, remember?" Tears brimmed in her eyes as she nodded, the weight of unspoken feelings and untold truths hanging between them. Community voices, unraveling tension. Just as they were about to delve deeper into the conversation, a loud crash from the backyard shattered the moment. The noise jolted them both from their introspection, and they exchanged startled glances. "What was that?" Emily asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. "Let's check it out," Jake replied, feeling the tension rise within him once more. He knew they needed to confront the issues in their relationship, but the world outside seemed to have other plans. They rushed outside to find a group of children, including Sophie, gathered around the overturned backyard swing set. Jake's heart raced as he scanned the area for Sophie, relief flooding through him when he saw her standing unharmed, her wide eyes filled with fear and concern. "Daddy," she cried, rushing toward him. The swing set fell down. "I was on it, and it just. I'm okay, though," she added, her voice a mixture of excitement and terror. Jake knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his. "Did anyone get hurt?" "No, but I think we should fix it," Sophie exclaimed, her face lighting up with the thrill of the challenge. As Jake surveyed the damage, he noticed the other parents watching, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. Mrs. Jenkins stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the scene. "Everything all right?" she called out, her voice carrying a hint of judgment. "Just a little accident, nothing to worry about," Jake assured her, forcing a smile. But as he looked around, he could sense the whispers building, questions forming in the minds of the onlookers. Jake felt the weight of scrutiny, the community's gaze heavy upon him. An unfolding mystery. Where to go from here? With Sophie safely in his arms, Jake. The backyard incident hung over the family like a cloud, each passing moment amplifying the tension in Jake's heart. After the other parents dispersed, leaving only whispered concerns in their wake, he felt a heavy weight settle in the pit of his stomach. The swing set lay in disarray, a stark reminder of the chaos lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly normal lives. Jake set Sophie down gently, watching as she wandered back toward the swing, eager to climb back into the joy of her world. But Jake couldn't join her. The images of the letters and Emily's unshared fears replayed in his mind like a haunting melody. It was clear now, their family was unraveling, and he had been oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the calm facade. He turned to Emily, who was standing a few steps behind him, her arms crossed tightly, as if to shield herself from the world. The worry lines etched across her forehead told him everything he needed to know. They could no longer ignore the unspoken words between them. Jake began, his voice firm yet gentle. "We need to talk about this, about everything. I can't keep pretending that things are okay when they're not." Emily's gaze flickered to the ground, her silence heavy with tension. "I don't want to fight, Jake," she murmured, but the underlying fear in her voice betrayed her. "I don't want to fight either," he replied, stepping closer to her. "But we can't ignore this. We have to face it together." With a deep breath, he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I can't be the only one trying to hold everything together. You need to share what you're feeling. I need to know." The breaking point. A storm of emotion. For a moment, Emily hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Then, as if the dam had finally broken, the words poured out of her like a flood. "It's just so hard, Jake," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Every time you leave, I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. I try to be strong for Sophie, but I'm so afraid. Afraid that something might happen to you, or that I'll have to raise her alone." Jake's heart ached at her admission, guilt gnawing at him. "I had no idea you felt this way," he said softly. "You're not alone. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. I'm still here. I want to be part of this, part of you and Sophie." The emotional wall between them began to crumble as Jake's words settled into the air. Emily looked up at him, her expression raw with vulnerability. "But what if I can't handle it? What if I can't be the mother she needs while you're gone?" "You already are. You've been doing it for months. You're stronger than you realize." The acknowledgement seemed to stir something within her, and she took a step closer, leaning into him as if seeking refuge from the storm raging inside her. They stood there, embracing, lost in the warmth of each other's presence. But just as hope began to blossom between them, a loud noise shattered the moment. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the basement, sending both of them into a state of alarm. Jake pulled away, a rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "What was that?" Emily whispered, her face pale. "I don't know," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "But we need to check it out. Stay close." The descent into the unknown. With his heart racing, Jake took Emily's hand and led her toward the basement door. The shadows of the hallway felt alive, wrapping around them like an unsettling cloak. The growl echoed again, deeper and more menacing this time. It sent a shiver down Jake's spine, but he knew they had to face whatever was lurking below. They descended the stairs together, each creak of the wooden steps amplifying the tension. As they reached the bottom, the faint glow of a light flickered in the dark corners of the basement. Jake instinctively reached for the flashlight he always kept nearby, shining it into the dim space ahead. As the beam cut through the darkness, Jake's breath caught in his throat. What he found made his heart race even faster. In the far corner of the basement, huddled and trembling, was the dog he had seen earlier. Its body was tense, and it growled low, baring its teeth at a shadowy figure standing just beyond the light. "Jake?" Emily gasped, instinctively stepping back, her fear palpable. "It's okay," he murmured, holding up a hand to reassure her. "Just stay behind me." He took a cautious step forward, shining the flashlight toward the figure. The light revealed a disheveled man, wild-eyed and unkempt, crouched low against the wall. He looked ragged and worn, a specter of despair. "What are you doing here?" Jake demanded, his voice steady but firm, the soldier in him rising to the occasion. The man's gaze darted between Jake and the dog, fear evident in his eyes. "I didn't mean to intrude," he stammered, his voice shaky. "I'm just trying to find a place to stay. I didn't know anyone lived here." Confronting the past, an unexpected visitor. Jake's heart raced as he assessed the situation. The man seemed harmless, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. "How did you get in?" Jake asked, narrowing his eyes. I saw the door open, and I thought." The man's words trailed off as he took a tentative step back. The dog, sensing the danger, continued to growl, but Jake noticed the man was just as frightened as they were. "Please," the man pleaded, holding up his hands in surrender. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I've just fallen on hard times. Jake exchanged a glance with Emily, her eyes wide with shock. This was not how they had imagined their reunion, nor was this the first day back he had envisioned. Hard times, Jake echoed, his voice steady. What do you mean? My name is Daniel, the man said, his voice trembling. I used to live in this town. I lost everything. My job, my family. I've been homeless for months now, just trying to get by. I didn't want to intrude, but I was desperate. Jake felt a rush of emotions surge through him. Anger, confusion, compassion. He wanted to help, to reach out and understand, but he was also acutely aware of the implications of inviting a stranger into their home. A moral dilemma. The decision. Emily stepped forward, her maternal instincts kicking in. Jake, maybe we should call the police. They could help him find shelter or something. Jake nodded, torn between wanting to help Daniel and the instinct to protect his family. That might be a good idea, he agreed, keeping his tone calm. Daniel's face fell, and desperation seeped into his eyes. Please don't do that. I can't go back to a shelter. I'll get kicked out again. Just give me a chance. I can clean up around the house, help with chores. I just need a place to stay for a few nights. Jake hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He looked at Emily, who seemed torn as well, her brow furrowed in concern. What if he's dangerous? She whispered, barely audible. I know, but what if he's not? What if we can help? Jake countered, the soldier's sense of duty battling against his protective instincts as a husband and father. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the tension rise as he faced Daniel. Okay, here's the deal. You can stay for one night, but under one condition. You help around the house. No funny business, understood? Daniel nodded eagerly, relief washing over his features. I promise. I won't let you down. As Jake felt the tension ease slightly, he knew they had crossed a line. They were stepping into uncharted territory, and while his heart was filled with compassion, the situation felt precarious. A new reality. Boundaries and trust. They led Daniel upstairs, the air thick with uncertainty. Jake gestured toward the living room, where he could see the remnants of a once cheerful family life. Sophie's toys strewn across the floor, the remnants of breakfast still on the table. Just sit here for a moment. We'll get you something to eat, Jake said, trying to maintain a calm demeanor despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. As Daniel settled into the couch, Jake caught Emily's gaze, the unspoken question swirling between them. Are you okay with this? Jake asked quietly, concern etched across his features. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes searching his. I don't know, Jake. I want to help, but I'm scared. We'll keep our distance, set clear boundaries. If he steps out of line, we can ask him to leave. We can do this together. Emily nodded. The following days unfolded with a surreal quality that felt both strange and familiar. Daniel moved in with the family, and what had begun as a desperate act of kindness slowly morphed into an unexpected partnership. Jake and Emily set boundaries, outlining Daniel's responsibilities around the house in exchange for a place to stay. Each day, he helped with chores, mowing the lawn, cleaning the garage, and even playing with Sophie, who took an instant liking to him. The first evening after Daniel arrived, they sat around the dinner table, an atmosphere of cautious optimism enveloping the space. Emily served spaghetti, Sophie's favorite, while Jake tried to keep the conversation light. They talked about the weather, shared jokes, and even discussed Sophie's latest art project. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling of unease that hovered just beneath the surface. As Daniel talked animatedly about his past, his childhood in the town, his dreams of becoming a mechanic, Jake observed the way Emily's smile seemed to return, how the laughter at the table felt genuine, if fleeting. But with every story Daniel shared, Jake couldn't help but wonder what was left unsaid, the layers of Daniel's life that remained hidden beneath his charming facade. After dinner, Jake and Emily took a moment to themselves, stepping outside to watch Sophie chase fireflies in the yard. The night sky was a tapestry of stars, and for a brief moment, the worries of the day faded into the background. But just as Jake felt a flicker of hope, his phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to reality. An unexpected visitor. Trouble brews. It was a text from his neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. "Jake, have you heard the rumors going around town? People are saying that there's a strange man staying with you. Just wanted to make sure you're all right." A wave of frustration washed over him. Rumors, the very thing he had feared. "Great," he muttered, glancing at Emily, who looked concerned. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Just Mrs. Jenkins checking in," Jake replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. "You know how the town is. I think we need to be careful." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "I know. It's just, I feel like we're doing the right thing. But I'm also scared of what people will think." That night, as they tucked Sophie into bed, the weight of the world felt heavier. Jake stayed up late, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. Would they face backlash from the community? Would this act of kindness cost them more than they anticipated? The next morning, the tension in the air was palpable. Jake and Emily tried to act as if everything was normal, but the shadows of doubt crept in. Daniel seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of unease swirling around the household. He continued to help with chores and even volunteered to walk Sophie to school, a gesture that brought a smile to her face. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was hiding something. Each interaction left him with more questions than answers, and the uncertainty gnawed at him like a relentless hunger. The fallout. Facing consequences. As days turned into weeks, the facade of normalcy began to crumble. Word spread through the town like wildfire, and soon whispers turned into outright concern. One afternoon, as Jake returned home from work, he found a group of neighbors gathered outside his house, their expressions a mix of curiosity and judgment. "Jake," Mrs. Jenkins called out, stepping forward. "We need to talk." He felt the heat rise in his cheeks as he approached them. "What's going on?" "People are worried, you know. Having a stranger stay with you, especially someone like him," Mrs. Jenkins gestured toward the house. "It just doesn't sit right with us." Jake's jaw tightened. Daniel is not a threat. He's a good person who's fallen on hard times. "But how do you know that?" Another neighbor chimed in. "You can't just take in every homeless person you find. What if he's dangerous?" Anger bubbled within him, and he struggled to keep his voice steady. "He's been nothing but helpful since he got here. You're judging him without knowing anything about him." "Jake, we're just looking out for you and your family," Mrs. Jenkins insisted, concern lacing her words. "You don't know what he's been through. People can be unpredictable." As they continued to voice their concerns, Jake felt the walls closing in on him. It was clear that no amount of reasoning would change their minds. He could sense the fear radiating from them, the stigma surrounding homelessness that clouded their judgment. A shattering revelation. The truth uncovered. That evening, Jake confronted Daniel about the rumors, wanting to get to the bottom of the mounting tension. They sat on the porch, the weight of the day pressing down heavily on both of them. "Listen, Daniel," Jake began, his voice steady yet firm. "I've been hearing some things around town. People are worried about you staying here." Daniel shifted uneasily, the carefree demeanor he had maintained slipping away. "I understand," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Do you have a criminal record? Is there something you haven't told us?" Jake pressed, wanting to ensure the safety of his family. Daniel's expression hardened for a moment before he looked away. "I have a past, okay? But it's not what you think. I made mistakes, bad ones, but I'm trying to change. I'm not here to hurt anyone." "Then why not tell us? Why keep it a secret?" "I didn't want you to judge me like everyone else. I thought if I could just show you I was worth helping, maybe you'd see I'm not just the sum of my mistakes." Jake's heart ached at Daniel's words, the honesty piercing through the tension. He felt a swell of empathy for the man sitting across from him. Daniel wasn't just a stranger. He was a reflection of the struggles that many faced, drowning in despair yet desperate for a chance. Mending relationships. A fragile trust. After that conversation, Jake knew they needed to build trust. The next day, he invited Daniel to help him with some yard work. As they pulled weeds and trimmed bushes, Jake began to see a different side of Daniel. He was hardworking, knowledgeable about landscaping, and genuinely wanted to contribute. "So, what was it like for you out there?" Jake asked cautiously, wanting to understand the reality of Daniel's life. "It was tough," Daniel replied, his voice tinged with regret. "I lost my job after my wife left me. I tried to get back on my feet, but it was like climbing a mountain with no rope. I never meant to end up on the streets." Jake listened intently, the story resonating with him. We all make mistakes. Sometimes we need a second chance to find our way again. As they worked side by side, the barriers that had existed between them began to dissolve. They shared stories, laughter, and even moments of vulnerability. Daniel opened up about his love for cars, and Jake realized how similar they were. Two men navigating life's challenges, each in their own way. Back inside, Emily noticed the change in Daniel. "He seems different," she said, watching as Daniel shared a funny story with Sophie. "Yeah," Jake replied, a sense of relief washing over him. "I think he's trying to prove himself. I feel like we're getting somewhere." But as the days turned into weeks, the shadows of the past still loomed large, casting doubt on their newfound relationship. The whispers in the community had not dissipated, and the tension remained palpable. The last straw. Confrontation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over their home, an unexpected knock on the door shattered the peace. Jake opened it to find Mrs. Jenkins and a few other neighbors standing on his doorstep, their faces set with determination. "We need to talk," Mrs. Jenkins said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "About what?" Jake asked, trying to keep his cool. "It's about Daniel," she stated firmly. "We can't just sit by and let this happen. He needs to leave. It's for your own good." Jake felt a rush of anger course through him. Why can't you see that he's just a man trying to change his life? What's so dangerous about that? "People like him don't change," another neighbor chimed in. "You have a family to protect, Jake. You can't just ignore the risks." As they spoke, the air grew thick with tension, and Jake felt trapped. The community he had grown up in, his home, was now divided by fear and misunderstanding. "You don't know him," Jake argued, desperation creeping into his voice. "He's working hard to get back on his feet, and he's been nothing but respectful. I won't throw him out just because you're afraid." Mrs. Jenkins stepped closer, her expression softening. "We care about you, Jake. We're just worried about what people will say, what might happen. You have to think about Sophie." The mention of Sophie cut deep. He looked past the neighbors, seeing her playing happily with Daniel in the yard. The days that followed the confrontation with the neighbors were filled with tension, yet within the household, something had begun to shift. Jake found himself caught between the loyalty he felt for Daniel and the palpable unease from the community. While Daniel worked tirelessly in the yard and bonded with Sophie, whispers of dissent circulated through the town like an unrelenting wind. Mrs. Jenkins and her supporters weren't done with their campaign. They began to escalate their efforts, organizing meetings where neighbors could voice their concerns about Jake's decision to let Daniel stay. Each gathering only seemed to stoke the fire of anxiety that loomed over Jake and Emily's family. One evening, as the sun set and shadows stretched long across the yard, Emily turned to Jake with worry etched on her face. "Jake, I can't keep doing this. The kids at school are saying things about Sophie. They don't understand." Jake felt a pang of guilt. He had assumed that their decision would be one rooted in compassion and goodwill, but the fallout had begun to encroach on their daughter's innocence. "I'm sorry, Em. I thought we were doing the right thing. I wanted to help." Emily's expression softened, but the worry remained. Maybe we need to reevaluate this situation. I don't want to take Sophie's childhood away from her because we tried to do something good. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was clear they were at a crossroads, and the path ahead was murky. The compassion they had shown to Daniel had unintended consequences that were now threatening their family's stability. Building bridges, an unlikely alliance. In the midst of the turmoil, Daniel remained unwavering. He continued to help around the house, showing gratitude through his actions rather than words. He spent more time with Sophie, teaching her how to ride a bike and encouraging her to draw, becoming a constant source of support in her life. Jake couldn't deny that Sophie was happier than she had been in months, but at what cost? Realizing that communication was key, Jake decided to reach out to Daniel one afternoon. As they worked together in the garden, he broached the subject. "Daniel, I think we need to talk. Things have become pretty tense with the neighbors, and I want to make sure you're okay with everything." Daniel paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I understand the situation, Jake. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need a chance to prove myself." "Prove yourself to whom? Me or the town?" Jake asked, curiosity piqued. "Both, I guess," Daniel admitted, his voice low. "I know people see me as just another homeless guy. I want them to see I'm more than that." With a deep breath, Jake realized that Daniel's struggle mirrored his own. They were both fighting against the weight of others' perceptions. What if we invited the neighbors over for a barbecue? Get them to see the real you. Let them know you're not a threat. Daniel's eyes widened. "You think that would help?" "It's worth a shot," Jake replied. "We can show them you're just a guy trying to get back on his feet. Maybe if they see you in a different light, they'll be more understanding." After some initial hesitation, Daniel agreed. Together, they set the date for the barbecue, and for the first time in a long while, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this would bridge the gap between their family and the community. A day of reckoning. The barbecue. The day of the barbecue arrived with an air of anticipation and anxiety. Emily worked hard to prepare the food, while Jake and Daniel set up the grill in the backyard. Sophie was bouncing around with excitement, eagerly helping Daniel set the table. As the sun began to dip in the sky, the scent of grilled burgers wafted through the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Jake kept glancing at the driveway, waiting for the neighbors to arrive. Slowly, familiar faces appeared. Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Thompson, and several other families from the neighborhood. Their expressions were wary, but Jake felt a sense of determination surge within him. "Welcome. Thanks for coming," Jake called out, gesturing for them to join the gathering. He felt Daniel beside him, nervously adjusting his shirt as they welcomed their guests. As the evening unfolded, Jake did his best to engage everyone in light conversation, introducing Daniel as they shared stories and laughter. The tension in the air slowly began to dissipate, and with every passing moment, Jake could see the shift in the atmosphere. The turning point, facing fears together. When the time came for Daniel to share his story, the moment felt pivotal. Jake nodded to him, encouraging him to speak. "This is Daniel," he announced, his voice steady. "He's been living with us for a few weeks. I thought it would be good for you all to hear his story." Daniel cleared his throat, glancing around at the unfamiliar faces. "I know I may not seem like someone you'd want around," he started, his voice shaking slightly. "But I want to be transparent. I've made mistakes in my life that I deeply regret. I lost my job, my home, and in some ways, my family. But I'm working hard to change that." The crowd listened intently, the atmosphere growing heavier as Daniel continued. "I'm not asking for sympathy or pity. I'm just trying to be better, to build a new life. And I appreciate the chance Jake and Emily have given me." As Daniel spoke, Jake noticed the expressions on the neighbors' faces begin to soften. The shift was tangible. The walls that had existed between them started to crumble as they began to see Daniel not as a burden, but as a human being with a story. Sophie, sitting on the grass, chimed in. "Daniel helps me draw. He's really good at it." Her innocent proclamation brought chuckles from the adults, and the tension began to break. Unity and understanding. A new beginning. As the evening continued, conversations began to flow more freely. Neighbors approached Daniel, asking about his interests and sharing their own stories of struggle and resilience. By the time the last burger had been served, it felt as if a bridge had been built between Daniel and the community. Mrs. Jenkins was one of the last to speak with Daniel. "I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions, Daniel. It's just, you can understand our concerns. But I see now that you're just trying to find your way. Thank you for being honest with us." Daniel smiled, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I want to be a part of this community." As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the yard, Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. The barbecue had been a success, not just in terms of food, but in terms of connection. It was a turning point, a moment where fear had transformed into understanding. A renewed commitment, family, and forgiveness. After the guests left, Jake and Emily sat on the porch, reflecting on the evening. "I can't believe that worked," Emily said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I was so worried about how it would go." Jake smiled, taking her hand. "Sometimes it just takes a little openness and vulnerability. It's not just about Daniel, it's about us too. We faced our fears and showed the community what we stood for." Emily nodded, the tension that had once resided in her shoulders easing away. "I think we've all learned something valuable tonight. People are complex. We can't judge them based on their pasts." Daniel emerged from the house, a soft smile on his face. "Thanks for everything, you guys. I really appreciate it." Jake looked at him, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "We're in this together, Daniel. You're part of our family now." Daniel's eyes glistened with emotion. "That means more to me than you know." As they sat together under the stars, a newfound bond formed among them. The silence of the night enveloped them, a soothing balm for the chaos that had preceded it, the healing journey, moving forward. In the weeks that followed, the community began to integrate Daniel into its fabric. He became a regular at neighborhood gatherings, slowly earning the trust of those who had once been wary. Jake, Emily, and Sophie welcomed him as a part of their family, celebrating holidays together and sharing life's everyday moments. Daniel found work at a local mechanic's shop, slowly rebuilding his life piece by piece. With each day, he grew more confident, and his interactions with the neighbors became increasingly genuine. He helped organize community events and was often seen volunteering at the local shelter, giving back to those in need, just as Jake had done for him. Sophie flourished under Daniel's mentorship, her artistic talents blossoming as they spent time drawing and painting together. Jake marveled at the transformation in his daughter. The light in her eyes was brighter than he had seen in a long time. The family began to heal from the trauma of war, the burden of the past slowly lifting. They learned to communicate openly, to embrace their fears, and to lean on each other for support. A lasting impact. Lessons learned. As autumn approached, the leaves painted the landscape in hues of orange and gold. Jake stood outside, watching as Daniel and